The era of good feelings was a time period in the United States that lasted from about 1816 to the early 1820s. It was called the era of good feelings because it was a time in history where partisan and politics had come to an end. This period was during the administration of President James Monroe.
But what would have happened if the era of good feelings hadn't happened? At the time, James Monroe won the 1816 presidential election by a landslide, defeating and eliminating the Federalist Party.
Without the one-party dominance by James Monroe and the Democratic Republicans, no one would have felt a need to make the second-party system, which created the Democratic Party, and we wouldn't have the Democratic Party today.
Also, the Federalists would have still been in the picture, and there still would have been many inter-party conflicts as opposed to inter-party conflicts, like those of the Democratic Republicans.
Without the era of good feelings, America would have also not achieved nearly as many internal improvements or infrastructure building, such as the addition of roads, canals, and harbor facilities for trade, specifically needed in the South. Without them, the South would have faced trade difficulties and difficulty putting their goods on the market.
Without a national bank during the War of 1812, the U.S. faced complicated war financing and banknotes with lower values. In 1816, the Second National Bank was created and then chartered for 20 years. Bad management of the National Bank led to the Panic of 1819. The growth of trade that followed the War of 1812 came to an abrupt stop.
Unemployment rose, banks began failing, mortgages were foreclosed, and agricultural prices decreased by half. Also, investment in Western lands collapsed. Without the era of good feelings, this economic depression would not have taken place because there would have been no Second National Bank chartered.
Without the era of good feelings, no protective tariffs would have been assessed by the government on certain goods to help the manufacturers in the host nation by artificially raising the price on foreign goods.
The Tariff Act of 1816 was enacted to protect American manufacturing against British post-war textile imports and promote national economic self-sufficiency. The Panic of 1819 encouraged high tariffs in order to protect American jobs. Without the era of good feelings, financial support for the government would not have been present at this time.
Without Monroe sending Jackson to fight the Seminole War during the era of good feelings in 1818, we would not have defeated Spain in their colony of Florida and would not have acquired Florida.
Lastly, without the era of good feelings, the Monroe Doctrine would not have been written, which creates a possibility of possible wars with European countries and stronger attempts to colonize in the Americas.
The Monroe Doctrine created a feeling of security for the U.S. and would not have happened without the era of good feelings having taken place. USA!
Without the era of good feelings, so many influential and important events in history would not have taken place or would have had a reason to take place, and our country would be very different today.